The poor today have less patience to continue to be poor because they know how the other people live on the other side of the river. This is to encourage for you to take a leadership. Leadership and action. And I think that this is the soul of this One Young World initiative. Soon I will introduce a young lady that comes from the tribe that is also proud of her origins and her culture. It is not incompatible of living in a global world with retaining our sense of identity and roots. Let me conclude. 35 years from now is nothing. Maybe I will not be here. I hope I will. But you know what? I like to die in the world which I'm remembered for stimulating, admitting the errors of our generations in the world, or what we have contaminated, or what we have done that could be corrected by you if you combine the vision, the leadership, and the action. I have written a book that is academically irreverent. And because it's irreverent, it has become the bestseller now. And it's now published in 12 languages. What the hell? I'm the result of the statistical error. I have the right to say my word. And my last word is, please, those who have the means, join this wonderful initiative of One Young World that was created at the beginning by Kate and David. Again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for giving me the privilege to participate in this initiative from the beginning, 6 years ago in England, and now in Arizona. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you very much. I introduce. Talking about roots. Talking about leadership and quality of education. It is a great pleasure for me and a privilege to introduce to you Anna Hogan, a native of Bishop Paiute tribe, who is studying law at Arizona University, and I hope to practice and defend the rights of the Native people. Law that is not only concentrated to your own community, but to combine the challenge of living in a global world consistent with the roots where you come from. She's studying the last year of law at Arizona University. She's very proud. She lives close to Yosemite National Park, in the mountain. She is one of the thousands of native tribes in California, and I'm sure that she also, I hope she's not the result of a statistical error, because she was here much more time than some other peoples who migrated to this country and now want to build thick walls. Defend your rights. Thank you very much. I want to introduce Anna Hogan. Congratulations.
Thank you, President Toledo. It is a true honor and inspiration as an Indigenous woman to be able to meet and be inspired by someone like you and your wife. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna. Fantastic. Okay, we're going to stay with this theme of Indigenous people in the environment. So would you welcome now to the stage Dr. Eliane Karp, who's anthropology professor at Stanford University. She's also the former First Lady of Peru. Eliane, where are you? And joining President Toledo and Dr. Karp, we have Zach McHugh, who is the chairman of the Economic Council of the Curve Lake First Nation people of Canada. Welcome, Zach. And to chair this panel, the environment correspondent of Fusion and Univision, Nicholas Ibaguen. Nicholas, over to you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank first One World for inviting us here. Second, the panelists. We're going to have a great panel. Thank you for being here. About a very important conversation, as you have heard President Toledo speak. There are over 370 million self-identified indigenous communities in more than 70 countries. And these communities, these people are one of the most vulnerable from climate change. We are pushing them to the cities, away from their traditional lands, their traditional food supply, water supply, and they're just passing to be part of like the poverty lines of our cities, while they used to be sustainable for years and years. So that's going to be the topic of our conversation. Let me just quickly reintroduce my panel that basically doesn't need any more introduction. But as you know, President Toledo, he served as President of Peru from 2001 and 2006. While his tenure, extreme poverty was reduced by 25%, employment rose at an average rate of 6%, making Peru one of the fastest growing economies in Latin America. Eliane Karp, she's a former First Lady of Peru, anthropologist, author, professor. She specializes in the study of Andean indigenous cultures and has been a strong voice and advocate to improve the lives of indigenous populations. And Zach McHugh, he studied business, politics, and sustainable development. He's presently an elected councillor at his home First Nation of Curve Lake in Canada. He uses his expertise and skills for the betterment of all First Nations of Canada. So thank you very much for being here. I would like to start this conversation by asking you, what are the largest, biggest challenges that indigenous communities are facing because of climate change? President Toledo.
Two of them. To keep our sense of belonging, roots, origin, be proud of where you were born, and secondly, to take care of the land where we are born, but the land of the world where the globalized community lives today. Environment. Technology has enormous responsibility today. It's a light at the end of the tunnel that perhaps could produce some new tools to reverse what we have damaged and to prevent what we are doing in the world. I grew up at 12,000 feet above sea level in the Andes. And I breathe clean air, the mountains. It's no longer there. I migrated to the coast, and I was a shoeshine boy. I sold lottery, sell newspaper, and I lived at a shanty town. And I met, that's why I mean by being a statistical error, I met 2 Peace Corps volunteers that came in 1963 after President John Kennedy created the Peace Corps. I met 2 Peace Corps volunteers, Joel and Nancy Meister. Nancy is over here. Nancy, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. As our community grew up in a fishing port, now the water of the sea is contaminated. I was born with severe early malnutrition. But part of the statistical error is my parents decided to migrate to the coast when I was 4.5 years old. So by necessity, we produce all the products of the sea, no matter what. I could not recuperate my malnutrition adverse impact. I'm still short and ugly. But by eating the products of the sea, now I know that it's called omega-3. The water is contaminated. And water is going to be one of the main factors that will lead to conflict in the world if we don't take actions now. Environment, with keeping a sense of belonging. Living in a global world, using the digital device to communicate, to improve, and to share knowledge to reverse the negative effects that we have produced and to anticipate for the future generations a better world for them to live.
Yeah, I heard an expert recently said that what we do in the next 5 to 10 years will affect what happens in the next 1,000 years. So yeah, we definitely need to act today.
Let me add something, my friend, a footnote. As a result of that error, I've been a professor at Harvard, at Stanford, and I met one of the best persons, my partner of my life, Eliane Karp, who comes from a dramatically different world, from Paris. What the hell has to do with the Andes? But so she is an anthropologist, and I'm her case study. I hope she never finished studying me anyway. Sorry.
That's okay. So you've been studying indigenous communities in the Andes for a while. How's your view on this problem?
I think that we are going now through a period of transition that, as you said very well, will have impacts on the next, I don't know how many years this planet is going to continue existing. The most important change at the level of indigenous communities is definitely the theme of water, land, adaptation and resilience. And as Anna was talking, and I was listening to her word, that she was talking about Mother Earth. And we were both educated in California, so these words are very familiar. In one of the native languages of Peru, which is called Quechua or Runasimi, Mother Earth is Pachamama. There's also Water Mother, and there's also one of the most important divinities, which are the highlands. Can I have the first picture, please? I hope it's there. Thank you. So I wanted to start talking about why it is so important, the water. If I didn't put a title to this, I wonder if you would have known what it is.
Probably not.
Probably not. This is the huge variety that Peru started producing more than 8,000 years ago. There is in the world about 5,000 different types of potatoes, of which Peru is producing 3,000 at least, and has provided it for a long, long time to the world for nothing. The generosity of the indigenous people as to their early technology is incredible. Can I have the next one, please? All right. It is hard to have those two things move. This is the traditional way of plowing and sowing. It's in the highlands, and you can see behind it what's left of the glacier. So just to tell you that Peru has one of the most biodiverse environment in the world. And this biodiversity changes probably every 500 meters. It allows for extreme complementary among people, barter, reciprocity. This way of living in a communal and reciprocity world without money has been lasting for a long, long time and is going away as tradition is fading because of migration. So I would definitely say, look at this glacier up there. It is a sacred apu, as we call it, so it's a sacred mountain. It's sacred because it provides all the water to the lakes and, as you mentioned, to the irrigation canals and then to the produce. This is today, it's a few months ago. It's not supposed to be that dry. It's not supposed to be that incipient, and it's supposed to have a lot of snow. So the loss of water brings to a loss of technology. Indigenous peoples in the highlands of the whole Andean world have been organized in civilized societies for more than 10,000 years now. Biodiversity, environmental biodiversity, goes together with biodiversity in linguistics. It goes with a pluricultural society. And paradigms of life are very, very different. So we are within societies that do not communicate today, as they never communicated with the Spaniards when they came to invade and destroy. And they can't communicate today with the modern world either. But it's not a problem of language. It's a problem of philosophy of life and mutual understanding, which does not allow us to resolve violence through which we are going now as a society. So yes, water, ancient technology. Maybe not this one was brought by the Spaniards, but the canal, the irrigation, the reservation of water, which has been lost by change of climate.
Thank you. What's the experience in Canada?
Canada is an entirely different beast, I would say, but the impacts and the ideas are very similar. The president talked about how environment is such deeply rooted in as who we are as a people, in our morals, and it guides a large amount of how we as indigenous populations live and interact. That saying of Mother Earth is huge for us. As an indigenous person from Canada, that is rooted in our culture to take care of Mother Earth, and there's actually a teaching that is taught at a very young age to us as the 7 generations teaching. So as an indigenous person, we're not supposed to think of one lifespan. We're not supposed to think of what's going on in our lives. we're supposed to be thinking of that seventh generation of our grandkids and our grandkids and our grandkids to make sure that we leave the Earth, Mother Earth, better off than we did when we inherited it. So that's something that's deeply rooted in our psychology and our morals. And with that, as far as you guys would know that Canada and the U.S. make up the largest freshwater body in the world, and because of that moral obligation that we have, there's a fierce amount of protection when it comes to those to protecting the water. We're 70% water ourselves. Everything feeds off water. If there's not the protection of clean water for future generations, how can we as a civilization survive? When you talk about 9 billion people in the coming years, the president quoted. So as an Indigenous person in Canada, a different political sphere, but also the problems are very much the same. I hear the young lady talking about California and how their populations have been moved over into reservations. It's a mirror image of everything that happened in Canada as well. And there's such great cohesiveness and similarities between all Indigenous populations in North America and even Southern America, the Americas. It's very staggering as a First Nations person from Canada to see that those similarities. But I think with those similarities, we also are seeing and jumping on board similar ways of thinking to be able to enact change when it comes to climate change.
So let's discuss a little bit about the role of government, because I had the opportunity to witness in different places Indigenous communities being very affected. In Canada, for example, I did a story on the Yukon where actually the government was fighting the First Nations people to exploit a watershed. They wanted to exploit 80% of the watershed, and actually the First Nations people lost, and now they appealed, and there's like a big fight. And I know in Peru, I did a story on illegal gold mining on the Amazon, and I know there's a big issue over there about the Indigenous communities being pushed and taken away from the Amazon rainforest and destroying down there. But I also know there was a law recently that Indigenous communities were supposed to be consulted before any exploitation had to occur in their lands. But I heard that they're not respecting that law a lot. So let's talk a little bit about the role of government and the rights of Indigenous communities from the Peruvian perspective and then the Canadian perspective.
Listen, just as I presented 3 different challenges: clean water, food security, and to reverse the negative effects of climate changes, let me share with you some relatively good news about the Latin American continent. Latin America has 47% of the clean water of the world. Latin America has one of the few lands to breathe yet in the Amazons. Latin America is the continent that has more biodiversity, as Eliane has said, that enable us to produce all types of food products all year round, while in other parts of the world for climatic reasons cannot do so. Now, we have the responsibility to keep those natural resources. It would be a mistake, and you know well, being from Colombia, if we continue to survive and make economic growth only based on exported of raw material, gold, silver, copper, oil, gas, we will be undermining and increasing the deterioration of the climate. We need to make a jump, my friends, young people of the world. We need to make a jump of a leadership that is based not on the export of raw material, which prices fluctuates in the international market, jump from raw material exports to a knowledge economy. And that perhaps will decrease the rate of deterioration, because doing mining contaminates the water. It creates contamination of the environment for the native communities, because most of the mines are based in the Andes and in the jungle. And those three positive things, water, a land to breathe, and biodiversity, are encouraging positive things if we have the leadership of these young people to make decisions to stop the deterioration of the environment. So action, as Case said, David has mentioned, action is more required today. And that's what I said before. The world needs more leadership and less politics.
Thank you.
Yeah, in Canada, there's been significant changes politically and in the area of resource development. Canada's economy is primarily a resource-based economy, export-driven. We think of softwood lumber, oil and gas, aggregates as well. In about 2 years ago, there was a change in legislation that enacted a legislation called the duty to consult and accommodate with First Nation and Indigenous populations. A very interesting piece of legislation. I think it's 75% there. There still needs to be some amendments to that, but with that, there's been significant changes in how industry, government, and businesses engage First Nations populations in development of businesses, as well as impacts that would have in their traditional territory. I'll give you an example from my own First Nation. We're a group of First Nations called the Mississaugas of the Mississauga Nation. So if you're looking on a map, we're basically the entire southern half of Lake Ontario, of Ontario is what we consider our traditional territory. Highly developed, we have Toronto, we have Ottawa, we have Montreal within all those areas in our traditional territory. And so basically what happens now is it's a government duty to consult with the First Nations based on any development that happens in their traditional territory. So we have a nuclear reactor in our traditional territory that provides the majority of the power for all of Ontario, and it also spreads down into the northern states. They're currently undergoing a refit, so they're tearing down the old one, renovating and refurbishing that system so that it's able to produce for another 100 years or so. With that, there's significant environmental impacts with regards to spent fuel rods and stuff like that. Those discussions have to take place with First Nations people as where we are going to store that radioactive waste. And we're not talking about 2 or 3 tons of waste here. We're talking about 7 arena-sized buildings housing spent fuel rods because of those nuclear reactors. And there's been discussions on a deep geological repository is what they call it, which is storing it basically under the ground for its half-life of 120,000 years. And the discussion with the First Nation population is how do we make sure that repository is safe? If you look at the languages between the human culture is such a small blip on the radar of what the planet is. If we're putting up signs that's saying radioactive waste in 120,000 years, is our language even going to be around to be able to understand what that sign means? How much have we grown cognitively and stuff like that? So, though that conservation is always forefront in our mind, and making sure that that not only are we safe, and again, that 7th-generation teaching comes in place to make sure that we are looking after our environment. But those are some new things that have come out recently for Canada. But
thank you. We're running out of time, so I don't wanna finish without asking you, what can young people do to get involved and to help these indigenous communities' rights?
Can I have the last slide that says illegal mining, please? Because talking about this, thank you. This is what we have today. There is no worse combination than extractive industry and indigenous communities trying to preserve Pachamama, Mother Earth. This is a fatal combination. This is happening today. In the Amazon region, it's illegal mining. It's destroying communities. It's pushing them away. And this in spite of the legal framework that we have. So indigenous people in Peru do not relate to their body of laws. They relate to the ILO 169 convenio. Agreement. And that gives them the right of previous consent, as you just mentioned. It's not respected by the government, it's not respected by the miners. These are illegal miners. It's a special problem. What you can do is probably get involved through, I would say be careful which NGOs, but through NGOs, through indigenous organizations, to fight all these illegal events which are happening, to push for the implementation of this legal framework, which is a UN framework. It's the same for the whole world. And even beyond what the Peruvian government wants or doesn't want to do, help out, try to work with the mining system also and tell them they cannot destroy this planet. Most of the problems comes from them. So let's try to untie this relationship of extractive industry, which is just solely for the benefit of the industry, of that industry, and preservation or promotion or empowerment of what is, in my mind, the most important. Take care, the ones who take care, the guardians of this planet, which are the indigenous peoples of the world.
Any closing remarks? I have this clock that is calling.
I believe she covered it quite eloquently, but again, it's educating yourself. You know, the indigenous populations, I think for a long time have been seen as undereducated, but I always say that we've had our PhDs in environmentalism long before there was a bona fide university that dealt with environmentalism, and that's seen in how the watersheds and stuff like that were protected pre-colonization. So educate yourself, you know, feel free to reach out to those indigenous populations because we're always happy to educate as well.
Thank you. President Toledo, closing remarks?
Quality of education, quality of education, quality of education. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. President, thank you very much.